Good evening everyone and happy Friday. Hello sa mga viewers natin na nanonood dito sa Pilipinas at sa ibang bansa. Welcome to the second episode of Season 2 of ang show na walang title pero hashtag satin ang eleksyon. Hashtag satin because we advocate for a safe, accountable, transparent, and inclusive elections which inspire national public confidence. In this episode, we are going to discuss the process of voter registration in the country now that the Commission on Elections is set to open voter registration. But more importantly, we will also talk about the Register Anywhere project of COMELEC and the possibility of using PhilSys ID or our national ID to make voter registration easier and more convenient especially for our vulnerable sectors. So without further ado, I will now introduce our guest for tonight. Attorney Isa Katrina T. Reyes was a legal and technical staff at the Office of the Commissioner Louis Tito Guia at the Commission on Elections from 2013 to 2020. She worked on several election committees and projects, namely the Satellite Registration for Indigenous Peoples, establishment of a strategic performance and management system, conduct of a random manual audit in 2 national elections in the Philippines, and coordination with the Philippine Judicial Academy on the training of trial court judges on election protest procedures. Currently, she is a policy consultant of the Legal Network for Truthful Elections, in which she and her team completed a research project on the subject of political party finance and campaign finance in the Philippines. For the past year, she has been performing work related to the political rights of the vulnerable sectors. Let us all welcome Attorney Isa Katrina Reyes. Good evening, Attorney Isa.
Good evening, everyone.
I'll now move on to our next guest. Dr. Maureen Ava Mata is a bone cancer survivor, a leader, and a woman with disability for more than a decade who fights for the inclusion, dignity, and rights of persons with disabilities. She's a graduate of medicine at Pamantasan ng Lungsod ng Maynila and currently taking up Masters in Public Administration. She served as the sector head for persons with disabilities and senior citizens in the newly created Vulnerable Sectors Office of the Commission on Elections. Right now, she's a member of several non-government organizations such as Move As One Coalition, where she advocates for an accessible transportation system. Let us all welcome Dr. Maureen Ava Mata. Good evening, Dr. Maureen.
Yes, hi Alexa. Good evening po sa lahat. Hi. So, pati sa ating mga manonood. Hello.
Good evening po. And last but not the least, let us all welcome Attorney LJ Bernardo, the Administrative Chief from the Office of COMELEC Chairperson, Chairperson George Erwin Garcia. Good evening, Attorney LJ.
Thank you very much for inviting the COMELEC.
Okay. Thank you and good evening. So now we want to invite our audience to also join the discussion by sending messages to our hotlines, which you will now be seeing on your screens, and using the hashtag Satin ang Eleksyon. We are also live on Lente Philippines Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube accounts, and in our partners' Facebook accounts and pages. You vote positive vibes. Now you know, in defense of human rights and dignity movement, community access team for the deaf on COVID-19, Tayo Na Collaboratory for Young Leaders of Democracy, Lente Chapters Pages, Aktivista, Taratakbo, Simbahan Lingkod ng Bayan, Association of Law Students of the Philippines, National Sanggunian ng mga mag-aaral ng mga paaralang Loyola ng Ateneo de Manila, Hirayang Kabataan, and MICA Philippines. Please do not forget to like and share our episode tonight and use the hashtag Satin ang Eleksyon. So, marami tayong questions for our guests. So, simulan na natin ang ating kwentuhan. Okay, I think our first question is for Attorney LJ. Hi, Attorney LJ. Recently, COMELEC approved and announced the pilot testing of its Register Anywhere project, also called RAP, or is it called RAP po, Attorney LJ? In view of the same, what is the goal of COMELEC's RAP? for our in
Medyo nagka-choppy yata yung audio natin, pero clear ba ako? Coming through
Yes,
clear?
Attorney LJ.
Okay naman, sige. Una, wala pa yatang official na tawag kung RAP ba o Register Anywhere. But I've been hearing Register Anywhere project, the Register Anywhere project. So, in-announce ito at magkakaroon na ng pilot testing sa December sa NCR. And actually, kanina rin in-announce even ni Chairman kanina sa kanyang Twitter account na in-approve na rin yung pag-pilot testing nito sa Tacloban at sa Bukod. Tapos, ano bang goal namin dito na nakita niyo naman dati yung mga, of course, very long lines sa mga others. So, yung basically, hindi natin napapacilitate yung ating right of suffrage pag ganun kahaba yung mga lines. Hindi nakakapag-register yung ating mga botante at hindi rin sila nakakapag-transfer. Marami rin yung hindi nakakapag-transfer naman ng kanilang registration from one municipality or city to another. So the goal of the COMELEC here is to make that easier. And we responded to a lot of the calls also from civil society. Last elections, there were also calls for extension, di ba? So ito sana, ang goal sana natin dito, hindi na magkaroon ng extension at magkaroon ng mas madadaling avenues for everyone to actually register or transfer the registrations from one election office to talaga.
Okay. It's good to hear, Attorney LJ, that the Commission is considering the recommendations of our advocates. Especially, we also have advocates here, Dr. Maureen and Attorney Aiza. Attorney LJ, just a follow-up question. What were the criteria used by COMELEC in choosing the malls that will be used as pilot sites for the project?
So far po, sa ating pagkaalam, ay yung mga malls na choose sila, yung first and foremost, yung willingness nila to host our offices and to host our personnel. And basically, sila naman yung lumapit din sa COMELEC to please use the malls. No? So, okay. But basically, wala naman din kaming pinipiling lugar kung saan po dapat mag-pilot test. Pero ito naman kasing pilot testing, hindi pa naman siya ganun, hindi pa naman pinili yung places. I mean, walang conscious effort to choose a place, but kung saan man open. Pero also, and it's just so happened that the malls are places where people congregate. And that's also an added bonus talaga. Na buti na lang yung mga malls nag-offer ng kanilang places and then magkaroon ng parang nag-meet yung needs and yung interests ng public and also, syempre, the private interests of the malls. They want people in their malls, no? So, that's good. But in the future, of course, I think that the vision is where people to choose places where people congregate, where it's really accessible for everyone. So, siguro yan yung mga malapit sa main thoroughfares, hindi na yung mga sa ilalim ng hagdan, sa basement, diba? Doon usually nakikita yung election offices eh. Doon na ilalagay. Kaya mahalaga rin. I know last week that's your topic, no? Yung COMELEC integrity bill, that's very important for us. Very important to plug it here as well and to continue to say that, yun. So, yun yung naman ito. Habang wala pang COMELEC integrity bill to host everyone, and it's a good idea also to have satellite offices or designated areas where people can register.
Yes. Thank you, Attorney LJ, for recalling our episode. Everyone, you can watch our previous episode on the COMELEC Integrity Bill, another related topic on our topic tonight. So, Attorney LJ, last question before we move to Attorney Aiza and Dr. Mao. Does this, since you said na there was no conscious effort to actually deliberately select malls, does this mean that COMELEC will consider other types of easily accessible places in the future pag hindi na tayo nasa pilot phase of the project?
Yes, of course po. No? Yan po talaga, I think, nasa pipeline na yan to really choose. Ang naisip nga namin as many places as possible. And more accessible places would always be, of course, super welcome. Given na rin na meron naman din kaming vulnerable sectors office, and we're also election by election learning more and more about inclusivity and the needs of all our vulnerable sectors. So yun, meron ng election accessible, easy accessible polling places, and in the future, more and more venues where we can host our vulnerable sectors who are always welcome.
Okay. Thank you, Attorney LJ. Now for our next question, while we wait for Dr. Mao to get back to our stream, this question is for Attorney Aiza. Attorney Aiza, as an advocate for, or as someone who has worked on issues regarding vulnerable sectors for a long time, what are the usual challenges faced by members of the vulnerable sectors, especially during voter registration?
Hello. So, usually kasi, the main problem would be the accessibility. Yung concept ng ating accessibility for our vulnerable sectors. So, for our indigenous peoples, they would usually live in far-flung areas. So, we have far-flung provinces, but the areas where our indigenous peoples usually live, our ICCs, indigenous cultural communities, are really far from the center sa ating mga bayan. So accessibility would be a problem by virtue of their geographical location. For persons with disabilities, usually yung accessibility would be kung the location where we register would be something which is convenient and usable for them, considering their circumstances. But I think Doc Ma would be the best person to discuss the persons with disabilities. So, yan usually yung issues on accessibility. Second would be lack of documentary requirements. So, usually, yung ating mga indigenous peoples, they don't have the relevant IDs, the documents which we would need for registration. Of course, there are policies which would address this naman, pero yon, it's a challenge for our indigenous peoples. PDLs usually also are persons deprived with liberty and of liberty. Yan din, lack of documentary requirements. And of course, financial costs. Diba? Kung malayo ka nakatira sa lugar kung saan magrerehistro, it would entail money to pay for transportation. Even our senior citizens, diba? Kunwari, instead of using the money for food, medication, this would go to transportation. Fourth would be access to information. Sometimes, talagang mahirap mag-disseminate ng information to our vulnerable sectors, maybe by virtue of their geographic location, as I mentioned a while ago. Yan. So, minsan nag-a-announce tayo, di ba, na register na tayo para hindi tayo sa dulo nagmamadali. But we always find that close to the elections, pag close na sasara na ang ating registration, maraming tao. Kasi doon naman heightened yung information natin, di ba? Kumakalat siya to more people. Kaya mas nagre-register sila at that time. So it shows na meron pa ring issue on information dissemination. So for me, those are the challenges and issues currently faced by our vulnerable sectors.
Okay, there are a lot so geographical, yung accessibility in terms of information, geographical, and even the structure of our buildings, or where our where we register po. But Attorney Aiza, as someone also who worked for a long time in the Commission on Elections, how are these issues currently being resolved or being tried to resolve?
Yun, as I mentioned a while ago, kunwari, lack of documentary requirement. We usually have naman a policy, it's a step in our rules, which would say, pwede mag-identify ang isang registered voter ng up to 3 people kung walang ID, diba? Or relative within 4th degree of consanguinity or affinity. So this would substitute yung ating lack of documentary requirement. Kunwari wala kang ID, pwede ka naman i-identify ng registered voter in the city. Pero meron kasi siyang cap, diba? Usually parang up to 3 lang ang pwede nila i-identify. Satellite registration is a step to bring voter registration closer to our vulnerable sectors. Like yun sinabi ko, kung geographical location, our COMELEC would usually, Attorney LJ would know this, our COMELEC would usually work with barangays, municipalities, para doon mag-conduct ng voter registration. Express lanes usually are granted to our persons with disabilities para pagka dating nila, they don't fall in line that long. Kasi considering nga yung circumstances nila, baka hindi nila kaya pumila sa ating linya ng matagal. So, express lanes. And of course, help of our NGOs and CSOs would usually be crucial for transportation. Kunwari, it would be in coordination with our indigenous peoples communities. Makikipag-coordinate tayo sa kanila. We try to provide them with transportation so that they can go. Also with persons with disabilities and senior citizens, I think. Yan.
Maybe Attorney LJ can also add to this. Maybe there are now existing policies within COMELEC that aim to improve or at least try to improve these issues.
Actually, ang hindi na lang siguro nasabi dun is making it early, yung early registration and early voting po, no? For ano, saka siguro kung matanggal yung deadlines and siguro mabigyan pa ng other special policies for our vulnerable sectors, that would be better po. And siguro at the administrative side, mas pinapaigting po ngayon yung development ng ating vulnerable sectors office so that they can be more capable in addressing all of the issues po. Na myriad issues kasi, daming intersections of vulnerable sectors.
Yeah,
Pero very
actually,
exhaustive yung ating attorney exam. Pero,
yes, po. Attorney LJ, you mentioned that making voter registration early is probably a significant step towards solving these issues. Attorney Isa, I think Lente is doing a reform on this. Maybe you can discuss how yung progress ng technical work po on this, making registration early. And also vulnerable sectors office, strengthening the VSO.
So kasi, as Attorney LJ said, yung institutionalization, let's start with institutionalization of the VSO first. Kasi 'di ba, COMELEC created the Vulnerable Sectors Office, I think late 2019. So, of course, the work of the committees of the vulnerable sectors like yung indigenous peoples na na-mention natin, our persons with disabilities, went to our vulnerable sector office. So they just went through the 2022 national and local elections. They have a staff of, I think, a director, 3 sector heads, some administrative staff. But of course, institutionalization would bring in more permanence, diba? Job security, lagi naman yan importante sa ating mga our COMELEC officials in doing their jobs. Of course, when you institutionalize, they become more permanent, mas nahahawakan nila yung mga projects, 'di ba? Hindi yan magpapalit-palit ng tao. So, yan yung significance ng institutionalization, mas the budget would always be there. So, ganyan siya tingnan in terms of institutionalizing. Early registration and early voting, I think medyo connected yung concept. So, what we want sana is registered members of the vulnerable sectors would be able to vote earlier para yon hindi na sila sabay during the actual day of the election, just to grant them and grant them access, and then give their rights more, paano ba? Empowering yung rights nila more. Kasi nga, considering yung circumstances nila, mahirap na makipagsabayan on the day of the elections for them. So, this is something na tinitingnan natin for our vulnerable sectors.
Okay. Ang dami na nating na-discuss so far, but so far, basically, the point of Attorney LJ and Attorney Aiza is that strengthening the COMELEC internally or administratively would also translate to better service for our registrants. While we're still waiting for Talk Mao to get back to stream, let's move on to another topic. And Attorney Aiza, I will ask you again. In addressing the issues that you've mentioned a while ago about voter registration process, and still we're talking about making it convenient, the registration process. Do you think it is possible for government issued IDs such as the PhilSys card or our national ID, as we often call it, to make the process or such process easier and faster? And maybe Attorney LG can also butt in later after Attorney Aiza.
Okay, so one of the things that we're also looking at is we have the PhilSys right now, diba? By virtue of a Republic Act, I think 11055. So Filipinos, resident aliens are asked to register under the PhilSys, yung Philippine Identification System natin. So when you register there, they have your data, like your full name, your address, your age, right? So how? Siguro what we're looking at, we're calling this as passive voter registration. Jurisdictions call it automatic voter registration. So what will happen in this scheme or concept? Parang the data of a person is transferred from one government database. For example, it can be a population register, such as the PhilSys, or sa ibang jurisdiction, motor vehicle register, like yung mga DMV, like our LTO. And then, yung data ng isang tao, tina-transfer siya from one government agency to another government agency for purposes of voter registration. So what we're seeing here in the Philippines as a possibility is PhilSys, transfer of data from PhilSys to COMELEC for purposes of voter registration.
Okay. Exciting. Attorney Aiza, how do you think can this parang bright idea help make voting or voter registration rather more accessible to Filipinos, especially for vulnerable sectors?
Sige, kaya kasi siya passive and automatic. Kasi in a sense na when you register in one government agency, and what we're thinking is if a voter or if a person does not signify na ayaw niya magpa-register as a voter in one government agency like PhilSys, for example, then pwede na i-transfer yung data niya for voter registration. How is it more accessible? Of course, it would grant kung naka-register ka na in one agency, automatic ka na in another agency. So it's not only more accessible, mako-cover niya yung buong country, like kunwari, mako-cover niya yung buong database ng PhilSys, and it's more convenient, more efficient, kasi one-time registration, and then, or updating, and then your data goes to another government agency for purposes of registration.
So basically streamlining and then in turn reducing time and then more efficient. Attorney LJ, we're interested probably in your thoughts, or maybe if you can speak on behalf of COMELEC or the office of Chair Garcia about your thoughts on this topic.
Okay. So what I know of from my superior, Chairman Garcia, he always likes initiatives that makes it easier, makes it more, makes suffrage more accessible for everyone. So I'm gonna start from there. Although kasi wala pang talagang discussions on this at the COMELEC side. Although I think last deliberations at the committee level sa House of Representatives, medyo na-ask na siya. And our research further gave na parang hindi yata aligned yung system so far. Although that's a technical question that I think the ITD of the COMELEC could really just bridge, naman, di ba? So in a way that would make it really, really easier for Filipinos to be registered as voters. And what I know from COMELEC naman, from the workings of COMELEC, we always look at experiences of other countries as well. And then also, yun nga, enabling more suffrage is always a goal for the commission. And if that's the end game for that, and syempre, of course, we have to really look at the privacy laws also, kung yung mga waivers na yan. Although, I think those are technical questions that could be easily, supplanted by legislation or by technical expertise as well, which the COMELEC has. So I don't see anything alarming, I think, for the COMELEC. Without saying na, kasi syempre wala pang official position ng COMELEC and bank on this. But from what I've experienced so far, working in the COMELEC, that's always the goal. More suffrage is always better. Easier registration is always better. So I think, as discussed, passive or automatic registration will be a welcome development for COMELEC as well.
Okay. Attorney LJ, you brought up technical issues. Maybe Attorney Isaac can also share more of that since they're doing. But just before we go to Attorney Isaac, Attorney LJ, correct me if I'm wrong. But recently, COMELEC launched its election summit, which will be conducted on January 2023. And I heard that the theme that will be used for the summit is on digital transformation and use of technology, basically. So that does mean that COMELEC is really open to this kind of policy recommendation.
Yes. Actually, we just also formed our Committee on Digital Transformation, headed by our very able technical expert, Commissioner Nelson Celis. So that's really the general direction the COMELEC is going towards. Ibig sabihin talagang we're always looking at how our changing landscape also, because our laws are, of course, it was made when martial law period pa yata yung batas pang bansa, 881 yan. So, yun talaga yung isa sa bigger themes of COMELEC under under Chairman George Erwin M. Garcia. So, you could expect na COMELEC has more wiggle room, so to speak, in terms of developments at technology and information and technology.
Okay, so we're gonna have a little bit of a break after this, but let's ask. Oops, Attorney Isa went out of the stream. Okay, maybe we can ask Attorney Isa after she gets back to the stream. Oh, she's back again. Okay, hi, Attorney Isa. So Attorney Isa, before we go on break, Attorney LJ brought up about technical issues or difficulties that we may encounter to be able to implement the idea of automatic registration. What are your thoughts on this, or have you already in your technical work explored this issue? And in relation to this, are there alternative sources of personal data or information that can be used similarly for voter registration, just in case yung PhilSys doesn't work?
Okay, so parang two things siya, 'di ba, Alexa? So challenges that could pose when using the PhilSys data for voter registration. So actually, si Attorney LJ already said then what I think are the issues. Like for example, number one, hindi talaga kaya to do this without the use of technology, right? Kailangan ma-identify technologically how one database will be synced. I think yan ba, or integrated. Basta yung transfer ng data should be resolved in terms of the technology side. As a lawyer, I'm not very knowledgeable about this, so we would have to have our technology consultant to answer the specific issues on that. Second, of course, would be privacy. Nasabi na rin ni Attorney LJ kanina, privacy issues. Kasi ang general rule natin is we give our data for processing under the Data Privacy Act, but further processing this personal information or sensitive personal information would generally require consent, diba? So yan ang general rule natin. We look at it as kasi 'di ba since this is our legal framework, we would want to be able to trust that the government is doing what's expected lang with our personal information. We don't want to go beyond processing just for the sake of convenience. So of course there are privacy issues. Third, current natin under the Voter Registration Act is personal appearance before the election officer in order to register as a voter. So we would need to amend that law in order for this to happen. But again, those issues, may answer yan, may solutions yan. So if we want to push through with passive voter registration, automatic voter registration, we just have to find the solutions. Like for example, privacy issues, consent, there should be a mechanism by which we can ensure na alam ng ating mga persons who registered in the PhilSys are citizens and citizens na magagamit pa further yung information nila. So may mechanism lang dapat. Other sources of database, like I mentioned, motor vehicle database would always be popular in other jurisdiction, pero dito not so sure. Civil registry, we're looking into yung ating civil registry database kung pwede din siyang gamitin. It's older. PhilSys is mas modern, mas new, pero in terms of database, yan yung usual na tinitingnan natin.
Okay, thank you, Attorney Aiza and Attorney LJ. We have discussed a lot. So now we're going to take a quick break. And while we're taking a quick break, we're gonna show our newest segment in ang show na Walang Title. Kasi season 2 na, so nag-i-interview. The segment is called Mula sa Tinig ng Masa, where we highlight the actual experiences of our voters regarding different election processes to produce more grounded and contextualized policies. So for this segment and the first ever segment ng Mula sa Tinig ng Masa, tinanong po namin ang aming mga kapwa botante at di pa botante sa kahabaan ng Timog Avenue. Please watch.
Hello mga kalente, ako nga pala si Kevin at welcome sa pinakabago nating segment kung saan tatanungin natin ang opinyon ng ating mga kababayan patungkol sa eleksyon at iba pang napapanahong balita, ang Mula sa Tinig ng Masa. Tara! Okay, nandito tayo ngayon sa kahabaan ng Timog Avenue, Quezon City upang magtanong-tanong sa mga tao dito tungkol sa kanilang experience sa election registration noong nakaraang election at sa paparating na election. So tara, lakad muna tayo. Kuya, magandang araw po. Taga saan po kayo, kuya?
QC pero taga-probinsya po yung...
Okay. Paano po yun nung nakaraang election? Di po kayo nagpa-register?
Kasi po nandito yung trabaho ko tapos taga-probinsya po kaya mahirap po siyang pagrehistro.
Okay. Maraming salamat po, kuya.
Thank you.
Hello, magandang araw. Ano pong pangalan nila, ma'am?
Jubilee Naive.
Bumoto po ba kayo noong nakaraang election?
Yes.
Kumusta naman yung registration process sa Marikina?
Sobrang bilis niya kasi sobrang organized din nila kasi mag-asikaso, gano'n. Tapos accommodating pa yung mga tao na nag-aasikaso. Kaya ops din. Kaya sobrang bilis niya.
Paano pa natin ma-i-improve yung registration process?
Yun nga, mas maging handa yung mga mag-aasikaso, yung mga staff.
Bumoto po ba kayo nung nakaraang eleksyon?
Hindi.
Hindi? Bakit po hindi kayo nagrehistro para sa eleksyon, kuya?
Kasi para wala pagsisiyan kung nagkamali man ako ng naiboto ko.
Bumoto po ba kayo nung nakaraang eleksyon?
Bumoto ako.
Kumusta yung registration process ninyo noong nakaraang eleksyon?
Kasi nag-register ako, medyo maaga pa. So, hindi masyadong madami yung tao. Pero yung process kasi, though okay naman siya, may mga nag-a-assist, mababait yung mga tao. Magulo. Parang hindi mo alam saan ka pipila, ganon. Tapos yung mga nakapila ka na pala, hindi pala doon pipila talaga.
Sa atin ang eleksyon! Sa atin ang eleksyon!
Okay, we're back. That was a fun quick break. Please look forward to more Mula sa Tinig ng Masa segments. And now we're still here with Attorney LJ and Attorney Aiza. Unfortunately, Dr. Mao can't make it back to our stream because of connectivity issues, but we'll still continue our conversation. So we have talked about passive voter registration or automatic registration with integrating the PhilSys ID with voter registration. And Attorney LJ also mentioned a while ago, it's Register Anywhere project. So just to sort of synthesize what we have discussed so far, Attorney LJ, how do you think does this kind of reform that Attorney Aiza and her team is currently working on complement the efforts of COMELEC, especially for example, the REP? Register Anywhere project.
Siguro naman, for constitutional commissions like us, sana naman ang goal talaga namin is to always improve, And it's going to be a cycle of always checking where we are lacking, and then asking for solutions. I think what our democracy also guarantees, aside from every one person gets a vote, is that every person has a say. So, tuwang-tuwa kami na even the common person through social media can reach us and then actually offer suggestions. So, gusto kong sabihin na yung mga initiatives na ito na nakakaroon ng COMELEC ngayon is largely because COMELEC yearns for improvement, and the COMELEC also hears what the people are saying. So basically, doon naman sa medyo technical side ng Register Anywhere and also passive voters registration, these are very welcome developments, and this will actually entail also sana lang din makasabay yung COMELEC sa amount of work that's needed na kailangan gawin, And syempre, we are now starting with our pilot testing, and I trust naman that the COMELEC can and will be capable of, and will find also the answers and solutions to the proposed, very, very good proposals from our civil society partners like Lente.
Okay, Attorney Aiza, maybe you can also share your thoughts?
Okay, kasi 'di ba the Register Anywhere project, under our law kasi, we register, as I mentioned a while ago, we go to our election officer in the city or municipality where we reside, 'di ba? So kunwari ako, taga Manila ako. I go to the Manila election officer, may district pa yan. Anyway, para simple, Manila Election Officer's Office. Doon ako magre-register. That's the general rule, 'di ba? With the Register Anywhere project, you can go, 'di ba, to any to the pilot sites, and then COMELEC will take care of it, and then yung process kasi after registration, magkakaroon pa ng election registration body or ERB. 'Di ba? So ipo-process pa yung application for registration na yan. So dati, kailangan pumunta ka doon sa lugar mismo. Now, what COMELEC did is, pwede sa site na to, and then sila na mag-legwork on how to cascade it, paano siya mapupunta sa tamang ERB para ma-process yung application. So parang 'di ba, the process mas maganda siya in a sense na hindi ka kailangan ikaw yung pupunta. I mean, COMELEC took the initiative, and then sila na magpo-process para mabawasan yung burden ng ating mga registered voter. So extra step siya. What we want with the passive voter registration is PhilSys integration sa nakikita natin, ha. Kasi 'di ba the Register Anywhere project is on the COMELEC side. So ang mangyayari pa dito, this takes it even further. Kasi parang meron ka pang isang government agency and then COMELEC. Tapos the data would be shared to another government agency. And then that's when, the way we see it lang, that's when the Register Anywhere process becomes helpful. Kasi si COMELEC, kapag binigay na sa kanya, siya din yung magka-cascade doon sa ating mga ERB. para ma-process din nila. So actually, very complementary siya in the sense na nagkaroon na ng step within COMELEC and then we have another step from the outside para mas maging efficient and convenient pa siya sa ating mga registered voters.
Okay, yeah, actually very complimentary. And I really hope we can have more time to explore how we can synergize better efforts from CSO and COMELEC. But unfortunately, we're down to our last question. However, we will announce later an event that we're going to be hosting, so that a place where we can explore more of these questions and issues. Now for our last question. Last Wednesday, the Committee on Suffrage and Electoral Reforms from the House of Representatives deliberated and approved bills pertaining to the improvement of our voter registration. So even our House of Reps are also doing steps to improve our voter registration. And some of these bills include the amendment of the Voters Registration Act, the allowance for online voter registration, and repealing the cancellation of registration of voters who did not vote for in the immediately preceding two successive regular elections. So ang dami. Now for last questions, I think this is also a good way to end our show tonight. Attorney LJ, I'll ask you first. What can you say about these proposed changes for voter registration? Probably yung perspective ng COMELEC.
Yes. Of course, actually, just a backgrounder also, the Committee on Suffrage, yan actually meron pa ulit hearings next week because these are mga batas na umabot na ng third reading at pumasa dati. So the COMELEC has always been supportive. And then just checking the technical matters. Kunyari yung sa voter registration, yung sana matanggal na yung mga magkaroon ng mas stronger na partnership with the civil registrars, and para yung ating voters list ay malinis na, ganyan. Of course, yung support namin for yung sa online so that you don't have to go to the election office is always there, I guess. And then, actually, yung last week pa nga pumasa naman yung early voting. Tapos pumasa din yung sa committee level. So, we are open to initiatives. These are initiatives that have passed the third reading na ng Congress. So sana po magkaroon na naman ng counterpart bill from the Senate. So yun sana yung namin, yung sanang gusto namin mangyari. But also, just to as a person from the office of Chairman Garcia, we actually formed our policy group. We have 33 agenda points na for legislation. I hope we can share it with Lente soon kung ano yung mga gusto namin pa, at sana madagdagan pa yung mga gusto namin na maibigay. Yun lang. So far naman po, these reforms are welcomed by the COMELEC leadership in particular also.
Yes, I think Attorney LJ, integrity bill and early voting bill are the ones that already passed the committee level. Integrity bill also, a pioneering project of Lente. But also there are I think yung accessibility voting bill is also a counterpart bill that's already filed in the Senate. That's also an update for our viewers. Attorney LJ, one last question before we move to Attorney Aiza. I think Chairperson Garcia identified priority reforms or priority policy reforms that he wants to pursue in his stint as chairperson. If you could recommend, or if the COMELEC can recommend policies that should be given attention and prioritization by our lawmakers, what would that be? Probably top 3. Or top 5, ikaw na po bahala.
Top 3. Lagot ako. Pero ako lang to. I think from our paglabas-labas namin, for attending forums, all of the NGOs are saying that there's a lot to be done in terms of inclusivity and accessibility of elections in the Philippines. So that's one. I'll put it at my top kasi yan talaga yung how do we give more power to our MPs. Secondly, also, of course, our education information division, department, all those areas about education information reform and about elections should be given attention to. And also, siguro lastly, our independence. The independence of the COMELEC has always been, kasi pinaka-priority ko siya. Kasi siguro from all the, siya yung pinaka-challenging. How do you become independent from a political system? It actually gives you budget, gives you infrastructure. So yun, sana ang ano namin dyan is the building of the COMELEC and also our field offices, yung nga sa integrity bill. Akin lang po yun, baka pumatanggalan ako ng trabaho. sa aking pong observation. Tama.
Attorney LJ, I think pareho tayo kung magpa-prioritize ako. Strengthening the integrity and independence of the COMELEC. That's one, COMELEC Integrity Bill. And also strengthening EID. I think meron din atang policy recommendation ang LETE about strengthening EID. But again, we can probably talk about it in the next few episodes. Attorney Aiza, also your thoughts on this list of bills regarding improving our voter registration po. And also, if you can recommend what policies our lawmakers may prioritize, what would this be?
Okay, about yung cancellation, more on the activation yata yan di ba? You don't vote in 2 elections, you are considered deactivated. Kasi ang ano naman ng ating voters list, the way to look at it is we want it as far-reaching as possible. Kaya nga accessibility yung sinasabi natin di ba? Secondly, we want it accurate also. Kasi kaya nagkaroon ng ganyang step before is meron tayong nakikita na issue with like persons or registered voters who don't vote in elections, kaya nade-deactivate sila. So I think more on striking the balance. What is the data saying? Etong mga hindi ba bumobotong ito, are they still alive? Kasi nga na-mention din ni Attorney LJ, we have a problem din, di ba? Para ma-cleanse yung voters list to make it sure na accurate pa siya. So what is the data saying? Ano ba sila? Are they just not voting? Then probably if majority ng ating mga tao hindi lang talaga bumoboto ng 2 elections, then there's no need to deactivate them, di ba? Pero if more people in the list kaya hindi nakakaboto ng 2 elections because pala nagkaroon na ng death, nagkaroon na ng change in circumstance, then we say na dapat talaga matanggal na sila sa listahan. So parang ganyan, the way to look at it lang from my perspective, pero hindi ko alam what the data is saying. Priority bills for me, I have a soft spot of course for the political party strengthening bill. Alam natin yan, matagal na siyang pending. I think 20 years, more than 20 years. So political party strengthening would be number 1. And of course, our steps for our vulnerable sectors. Lahat ng mga bills natin on them. Siguro kung early voting, basta ma-study lang yung policy further, automatic voter registration would really be, or passive voter registration would be beneficial to our vulnerable sectors. Pero meron din siyang, like, the entire population would be able to benefit from this policy kung ma-enact siya. So, I think yun na for me.
Yes. Since Attorney Aiza mentioned about strengthening political parties, there is a development on the last Wednesday, I think the political party development bill filed by Rep. Arroyo was also okayed in the suffrage committee. So at least we're seeing movements not only in improving our voter registration but also other aspects of our election. Before we close, we would like to hear what our audience thinks. I think we have a question Yes. Dr. Maureen. Unfortunately, Dr. Mal can't join, but she asked a question. Sa transpo po, during voters registration ng ating vulnerable sectors, do you have any plans para ma-ensure na ma-assist ang ating mga VS? I think I can let Attorney LJ answer this first, then Attorney Isa.
Ayun po. Although I have not yet inquired po sa ating Vulnerable Sectors Office, but I will, sa tingin ko po, no, wala pang ganun to concrete na, I will be lying if it's there are plans, and I've seen plans. Pero wala pa akong nakita, but I think that's a great suggestion po. If we could give assistance to transportation ng ating vulnerable sectors po.
Yes. Attorney Isa?
I think kasi in the previous election, like in the 2022 national and local elections, going to it, kasi di ba nagkaroon tayo ng COVID-19 pandemic. So, transportation, actually not just transportation, mobility talaga was affected, di ba? Kasi lockdown and then there were restrictions talaga para hindi din mag-spread yung COVID-19 at that time. So, we see na mayroon talagang issue with mobility, especially with the vulnerable sector. So what we were thinking at that time is, and actually ginawa naman natin in partnership with several government agencies like the DILG. Actually, si COMELEC VSO is also a partner in this project, which is to provide transportation to our vulnerable sector. So yan yung nakikita nating solution talaga. The way lang kasi na gawin natin siya, if ever, is, I think expansion can be, pero more on implementation siya. Like, we saw na pwede na talaga siyang gawin. Pero coverage talaga yung nakikita natin. Kasi at that time, it was our first run also. So, siguro in the next few months, this can be thought of as a regular project. Pero yon, expansion would be, ng covered area would be the issue there. Like, kailangan, mas coordinated, mas organized siguro yung project.
Okay. So we hope for a continuation of this project and an expansion of this. And sana siguro a quick is to sorry, Attorney Isa, yes.
Sorry, baka our other partners would be offended. Of course, aside from DILG, COMELEC, VSO, we would have to mention NAPC, NCIP. Sino pa ba nakalimutan ko? Basta, other agencies were really very helpful at that time para magawa natin yung project na yan.
Okay.
NCDA. Sorry.
NCDA. Okay, NAPC, DILG, COMELEC, VSO, NCDA.
And NCIP.
Yes. Okay. So we're now 5 minutes to 8. Any last thoughts, words po, Attorney Isa, Attorney LJ? Attorney, yes po, Attorney Isa.
It's sa akin, it's downtime again. We're not going, it's not an election year, hindi din tayo nasa preparatory year kasi we usually call yung the year before the elections yung preparatory year ng elections natin. So nandito tayo sa time ngayon where we can do a lot of thinking, a lot of policy changes para ready tayo towards the preparatory year. So I think it's always good to have good leadership, very innovative, open-minded leadership para makapag-create, makapag-strengthen ng partnerships. Not only with CSOs, of course, or like I mentioned a while ago, yung ating mga ibang government agencies are there. They can help the COMELEC in performing its mandate. So sa akin lang, this is really a good time to think about things to improve our elections in the coming years.
Attorney LG?
From the side of COMELEC, I think so we could start with plebiscites also. Hindi na naisip kasi madalas na-realize ko lang kanina, marami ring plebiscites na we could give. Siguro we could really test our policies over. Kung pilot testing man yan. But tama po si Attorney Aiza, it's really downtime. Really time to think about how to strengthen, how to improve elections and how we conduct it, how we enable voters to make their choices known sa ballots po. And actually, this year po, COMELEC has been undergoing a lot of reform. There's been a lot of initiatives coming from leadership, and I hope po that the people could support that. But also, it doesn't mean that I don't want you to criticize us. It's really we're really open for criticism, and we couldn't have implemented a lot of reforms without knowing it from the people, from a lot of feedback mechanisms that we have, and or sometimes that is given to us po. No? So I think po, as a final message, continue talking. Let's have the conversations over and over again, so that we, of course, kami po mga nasa COMELEC, sometimes we forget things, no? Syempre, kung nakafocus kasi sa mga bagay. Pero yun, conversations like this are very important. And we would like to thank our CSO, like Lente, for bearing with us and also for continually working with us to improve our operations and to enable our democracy.
Okay. Thank you very much. Maraming salamat po sa ating guests for their time tonight, and also to our audience. Sana nag-enjoy kayo talking or listening to Attorney Aiza and Attorney LJ as much as I had fun talking to them. So now, watch out for our upcoming ang show na walang title episodes of our season 2. Next Friday, November 25 from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. Ang show na walang title is also available in Spotify if you want to revisit and listen to our previous episodes. And please also look forward to the next episodes of Oras Na Pilipinas Dapat Pwede via FEBC Radio and Facebook Live next Friday, November 25 at 8 a.m. to 8:30 a.m. And tulad yan ang sabi ni Attorney LJ and Attorney Aiza, now is the time. We have 2 years more until the next midterm elections. So now is the time to talk about it. And we are very proud to announce to everyone that Lente will be holding such an event to talk about electoral issues and how to improve our election system. Kami po ay naghahanda ng MOVE, a colloquium on electoral reforms with the theme Maximizing Opportunities and Valuing Elections Through Electoral Reforms. So, MOVE. Please don't forget, mangyayari po ito from December 8 to 10 sa Century Park Hotel, Manila. For more events regarding the event, please follow our social media pages. Huwag po natin kalimutan i-like ang ating Facebook page, Lente Philippines, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok accounts at Lente_PH, and also revisit our website for resources at lente.org.ph. See you again next week, mga kalente. Magandang gabi.